Piano Tech Radio Hour. I'm here with JC Sanford. I'm going to introduce the program momentarily and then we'll get started. I'm also going to take a moment to let our live Zoom audience into this session. So thank you for joining us. Thanks for joining us here. If you're on Zoom live with us, welcome, welcome. Welcome on the Facebooks and the YouTubes. And we'll get started here momentarily. I'm Ethan Janney. I'm with JC Sanford. This is Piano Tech Radio Hour, and we are just about ready to begin. And I'll do an intro to the program, and we'll have an enlightening conversation today. So this is Piano Tech Radio Hour. Welcome. We gather here every Saturday to meet with and learn from some very fascinating and knowledgeable folks. Now, they might be in the piano world, manufacturers, rebuilders, um, but also, we talk to folks in other realms, musicians of related instruments, makers of other instruments. Of course, we always include piano techs. Now, our mutual goal here, we want to become better at our craft. We want to help each other. We, of course, want to create an ever more musical world together. Piano Tech Radio Hour, it's brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses. That is an online learning resource that brings you cutting edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. You can find out more about that at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. You can also subscribe to Radio Hour, just 16 bucks a month. Get direct access to each week's private Zoom call, as well as all the archival recordings of over 200 episodes in our member area. You can join using the link bit.ly/join PTRH, bit.ly/join PTRH. You should also know about our audio only versions of the program. That's the podcast, Piano Tech Radio Hour podcast, found at pianotechradio.com. We've been ranked in the top 100, top 10, even number one status in various locales in the performing arts category on iTunes. Very proud of that. Also, we have a Substack. We publish information that's more kind of advanced knowledge that you would find in our member area and give you a little peek into it on our Substack to see if you want to find out more. Could be about piano rebuilding, design of pianos, could again be about related content. We had one recently on jazz improvisation, which was highly regarded. So check out the private member area, check out the Substack for a sneak peek. And then, of course, we have our socials, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can follow us to figure out what's going to be happening next. And our email list will always keep you up to date as well. Just go to pianotechniciansmasterclass.com, enter your name and email, and you will magically be inside on the future of piano tech and everything related. Now, I would love to introduce our esteemed guest for today. Again, his name is J.C. Sanford, trombonist, composer, arranger, conductor whose work spans jazz, chamber music, and large ensemble writing. He's performed and collaborated with artists that include Danilo Pérez, Matt Wilson, and John Hollenbeck. He has conducted projects ranging from the John Hollenbeck Large Ensemble to the Alice Coltrane Orchestra. A protégé of Bob Brookmeyer, JC has built a creative life centered on composition, collaboration, and pushing musical forms into new territory while remaining deeply connected to tradition. His projects reveal a fascination with ensemble color, orchestration, and the ways written and improvised music can continuously shape one another. JC Sanford, welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour.
Thanks for having me, Ethan. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, we like to start in a common place and then branch out from there. And the common place is all of us here that joined the program, there was some magic moments when we were younger, when we came into contact with music itself, learning an instrument, genres, artists, and we started to develop an affinity, and somehow or another that morphed itself into a deeper exploration, some type of a career or focus on the domain of music. Tell us the story in brief of how little JC became big JC.
Yeah, for me, it's my dad was musical and theatrical,
Hmm.
and so I used to do my sister and I used to do like theater and musical theater and stuff when we were kids. But the main thing is that he worked at Musicland, which was a record store in the 1970s. Actually, I forget when it actually went belly up, but that was maybe in the 90s or something. But it was around, and so I was a little kid in this little town in Minnesota, and he would bring home all kinds of records from his job, and so we listened to things that were in the 1970s. You can kind of think about some of all the great kind of music that was sort of happening in the 1970s, and you know he didn't care about genre. I certainly didn't care about genre as a little kid, so I started listening to all kinds of different things, including jazz, but classical, country, pop, disco. Broadway shows was a huge thing, again because of the kind of the theater side of things, and even that. So I would be listening to like Annie or Cabaret and like dancing around with a cane and stuff like that and performing. When I was a little kid. So I just kind of again with that being like involved with theater and performance. Um, I liked performing, and that's first started to be more about singing, and then trombone kind of became more of a thing, and then when I got into college, more of arranging, and then eventually composing, and then I learned to be a good conductor because I wrote hard music. So it's sort of like I wanted my music to be played well. I had to be a decent conductor to be able to do that. So
Ah, I see how
yeah,
that evolved.
yeah,
Yes, when you have a vision, or I don't know what you call it when it's auditory. An auditory, they still call it a vision, an
I think so.
auditory
Yeah,
vision of how things are supposed to be.
yeah,
You become particular.
yeah.
I have a lot of respect for that ability. For myself being an improviser, I don't, for some reason, like even when I improvise, when I listen back to it, I'm like, this is great. But I don't always feel like I have the concept, in my head while I'm developing it. It comes out. It's almost like a mechanical process for me. But I love the sound, and I know that there's other people who kind of have more of like a preformed, thing in their head. I kind of like to just put ingredients together, and
Mm-hmm.
if there's other musicians involved, I kind of see how things evolve.
Right.
Wonderful. Well, let's go ahead and dive into the music as early as possible here. You've given us a few musical examples. What do you think would be most suitable first, given
Um.
our context so far?
Well, maybe we'll go a little bit chronologically, and we can do some the one of those large ensemble things. Maybe the tune "Your Word Alone," which is I think a good example of me trying to. I had like I had some good influences, people trying to get me to push the envelope when I started to write any kind of music, but definitely large ensemble music.
Hmm.
And I was also very intrigued by John Zorn and about how he makes these dramatic shifts, the kind of surprising dramatic shifts.
Hmm.
And I kind of tried to kind of like fold some musical styles into a big band context that maybe weren't you wouldn't always see or always hear. Um, so this is a tune, "Your Word Alone," that has this that changes character kind of back and forth, almost like there's these two parallel corridors that we kind of just like slip back and forth to, but they're meant to kind of be very contrasting and maybe out of context for a big band.
Cool. All right. Well, let's check it out. It's audio only, but I'll share a screen on the YouTube video, get a little peek at the album cover there. And let's see here. Let's hit play, and here we go. So this is basically just formulaic pop music, really,
Right.
when you really break it down.
Yeah.
Been done before.
Right.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but if I'm honest,
Yeah. No,
yeah,
it's yeah. Yeah. I'll own it. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. But that's fine. It's a
Yeah.
little
It,
bit
all
commercial. It's a
it's
little
all
bit commercial,
right.
and that's what you're going for.
It's all valid. It's all valid. Yeah.
That's your style. Yeah, I was really curious how it was going to end. I got kind of hooked in the beginning, and I wanted to know, where it would end. And yeah, I I had some fun things. It felt like uh, it reminded me, especially the way it has that kind of very simple lilt, kind of mysterious, almost of the Pink Panther. I don't know if you thought about that, but
I haven't, but there's probably some Henry Mancini somewhere percolating around in there. I wouldn't be
sure, sure.
surprised. Yeah, yeah.
But it was like the Pink Panther, you know, like on some real like espionage, but also there's definitely like some drugs involved. Like he ultimately involves becoming some sort of an addict, and there's a whole saga around that. It maybe even has like an ayahuasca journey in order to like overcome the addiction as part of the whole process. Um, but yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. I like that interpretation. Actually,
Um, yeah, tell me about your compositional process with something like this. Is it simply let me just simmer in, creative inspiration and take it from there? Does it evolve? Is it formed before you kind of get started putting pen to paper? Um, you clearly have some improvisational moments in there for the musician to kind of take things where they want. But yeah, what's the process of putting that together?
yes. So you know, I have like some generalized things that I do whenever I'm writing, some especially something of any kind of with any kind of form, extended form or anything to it. This was a commission, and so that kind of that sort of factors into kind of some of this decision making. So this was
Mm,
actually commissioned originally by my old college jazz band director Bob Washut at the University of Northern Iowa,
mm,
and he's like, "I got this really great violinist. Can you write something to feature with a violinist with a big band?"
mm.
Um, I think that's pretty much where he left it. Didn't give me
Okay.
much more than that. But so that was a thing to kind of that I wanted to. It's like, okay, how can I, include a violin in a big band in a way that sort of makes sense? And then this sort of like tango-y thing just like came to my head. More or less the little bits of that first melody kind of came, and everything else kind of came out of that. Um, and I and I knew that I was going to be kind of shifting back and forth. I was like, one of the things that I like to do is kind of mess with the expectation of the listener. Not always, but sometimes. Well, actually, to some degree, most of the time. Rather than kind of just like falling into these sort of patterns of like predictability and like this is going to happen. Okay, okay, this is going to happen. I mean, I love music that does that, and I play music that does that. But even when I play like a jazz standard or something like that, the way I think about phrasing and ideas, like I try to end things a little different than you might think that it might happen, or something like that.
Hmm.
Just put a little, go a different direction at the end of a phrase or something like that, so people don't just fall into this expectation thing. So, and again, like I said, I was kind of into Zorn at that point, so I was like, I'm going to shift to something really. So I have a tango in a big band, which is not that common, although there's plenty of great tango big band music. Heavy metal in a big band at that time was not very, very, very common either. So it's like, why wouldn't that be interesting to kind of go back and forth between those things? Pretty soon after that, though, after I get this sort of the general sort of material or sort of ideas, I sketch the whole form of the whole chart. Um, just like, just lines and just say, you know, this is what happens in this section. This is what happens, even if I don't really know yet what's going to happen. But I like have some ideas. It gives me some ideas about, and then it helps me kind of like go forward with that idea of, well, what can I know what generally would happen at this point. So what can I do that sort of follows that sort of tradition, but doesn't do exactly that thing that you expect. And so that's how this sort of thing happened. And actually, one of the funny accidents is after I was working with this a little bit and going back and forth between these two things, and I had entered everything on my Finale music software. One of my repeats I entered incorrectly, and it went back to the wrong part of the form, and I was like, "Oh my God, that sounds amazing! I'm going to do that." So that's where those little sort of interludes where we kind of like do this sudden, quick little bursts back to the tango when we're in this middle of this kind of climactic sort of heavy metal sort of section. And then so after I get the form and I'm kind of thinking about things like, and I try to see like how can I enhance. I was in New York, at the time, and all these incredible players. I'm using all these incredible players all the time, and it's like, how can I bring their individuality into kind of like enhance the music that I'm writing? And collective improvisation is usually a great way to do that. I'm trying to climax. Everything's just supposed to be super intense. How can I make it even more intense without just saying louder or make, and then you kind of throw these kind of indeterminacies in there, which is how these improvisers are going to go nuts, which basically what I tell them, just go nuts or whatever, and at that point. And then that kind of adds to the kind of the intensity for sure in those sort of times. And then, again, a lot of this is from influence, Brookmeyer, and like taking a melody and like really kind of like just dissect it and kind of move in a lot of ways. Also from when I was at New England Conservatory, and George Russell, who liked to do things where he kind of has different tempos sort of happening at the same time, which is what sort of happens there at the very end, where I sort of have certain people that are kind of stuck in this specific tempo, and then other people that are kind of playing in their own tempos, which again creates this kind of unsettled sort of nature to it before we get that final statement of just like those last few quarter notes.
Yeah, you almost yeah. I got a little rite of spring energy. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind
I
of
mean,
like,
yeah. I mean, we are so much, this amalgamation of our influences. I used to listen. Strangely enough, I used to listen to Rite of Spring before I went as I fell asleep when I was in undergrad. It's like not the kind of thing you would listen to that would be sort of relaxing, but those kinds of things, they get absorbed. I was just blown away by that. Not just the first time when I saw it when it was in Fantasia when I was like 7 years old or whatever in the movie, but when I was older and heard that, again, this sort of shifting character to it, this very intense sort of shifting character to it, mixed with sort of beauty and all these kinds of tension sort of things. I love that kind of thing.
you brought up New York. I have a business in New York. I live in Chicago, but I used to live there myself, and always love to talk about it a little bit on the program. So where are you now? And tell me about your time in New York.
So I live in Minnesota. I live in this small town, Northfield, Minnesota, which is just about 45 minutes south of the Twin Cities. So I do a lot of my work and stuff in the Twin Cities, although I do plenty of things in this town too, which we can maybe get into a little bit later. I went to high school here, and so once my wife and I had a kid in New York, and there's just enough things that were sort of the writing on the wall. Sort of, we can't really survive here anymore.
Your kids saw the threshold number of naked homeless people on the subway or something.
Yeah, no, even that was like, yeah, I think all that stuff was just like, it's just so hard. And I had enough things. I always had like plenty of cool things and great opportunities, but not enough to kind of like make it so that we could really survive in any sort of like less than totally frantic month to month sort of way.
Sure.
And we had a good living situation for a while, and then they sold the building. We had to move in this terrible situation, and it was just like our rent went up $500 a month, and it was just like, and then we were like, this is going to be a cycle that we had settled into kind of like relatively like, yes, it's hard, but we're cool. And so, yeah, we just couldn't deal with that anymore. But I lived there for 16 years, and after I graduated from New England Conservatory, and, overall, being an artist there, it's incredible. And I was lucky to kind of fall into well, maybe not fell into, but just kind of there's like that sort of a natural path of people who kind of came from really sort of creative environments, like I did at NEC, and then immediately started doing the BMI Jazz Composers Workshop, which was founded by my teacher, Bob Brookmeyer, who I studied with when I was at NEC. And so that I was just kind of starting to write kind of creative big band music because I was studying with Bob. And then that just became my sort of community in a lot of ways, because there was just all these people that were kind of just trying to do their version of the same thing I was doing, you know, and trying to write interesting big band music. And we had great guidance from Jim McNeely kind of the whole time I was there. Also a great pianist, one of the great, most underrated pianists, I think, jazz pianists actually. We just lost this past year. But Manny Album was there when I was still there. He passed away just a year after I came. Unfortunately, Micah Benny is one of the great arrangers, you know, of our time. So we got all this really great feedback, and then there were like really great musicians, like professional musicians who were like, you know, people that I saw on records and stuff like that that were just trying to figure out how to, you know, do their own thing with a large ensemble too. So that became sort of like the main kind of core of my community. But I was also living in Brooklyn and kind of started to really get involved with playing with like these, you know, a little bit more edgy sort of creative sort of individual voices, you know, people who really want to kind of do stuff their own way, you know, with people that also were like really open-minded and wanted to do that. So as a player and as a writer, I was always on this kind of like, we all come from this really great sort of lucky, you know, privileged, we'll say, training, you know, of like conservatory type, really, really high end. A lot of people went to Manhattan School. A lot of people went to Berkeley, you know, NYU, the New School. Like those are the kinds of people that Eastman that I hung out with. But most of the people that I did that with were creative and just didn't want to just like play, you know, professional gigs and stuff like that. So it was very rewarding. It was very enriching. It was a really inspiring environment to just be friends with all these like incredible players who were doing so many felt like very unique things, you know. So it was hard
When
to
was
leave
your
that.
last year there?
My last year was 2016.
Okay.
And I go back regularly and do projects there, and not as much after COVID. I kind of was going like 3 or 4 times a year until COVID, and then things have slowed down like they have for a lot of people in a lot of ways. So now I go once or twice a year, kind of, and just do a few projects and stuff like that.
All right. Now, do you keep an acoustic piano, or is that not your style?
Um, do I own one, or do I use it in groups that I
I mean, I'm sure you use it in ensembles, but yeah, do you own one? Yeah.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. My wife is a pianist, and she teaches piano, and she's a composer too. She's a very accomplished composer, Asuka Kakitani. She had a big band also in New York, but now she writes all kinds of chamber music and things like that too. She's incredible. So we have actually the piano I have here was Bob Washet's piano. My first mentor's piano. I ended up with it. He didn't have a place for it, so I ended up with it. So, and I write using the piano sometimes, and sometimes not. And you know, a lot of times I didn't have a piano. Like I didn't mention, like on that recording, you know, that's not like a standard big band. People who are listening could probably tell. Not only is there violin on it, there's cello, there's accordion, you know, French horn. So it's this sort of like chamber group that. It's sort of a chamber orchestra big band sort of hybrid sort of thing, and so I stopped using piano in a lot of ways because a lot of big band gigs, you know, they didn't have a piano in the place you would play, and I was like, keyboard is cool, but it doesn't capture. So I just like took that sort of out of the, you know, you don't have to factor that in, you know, whether that's there or not, you know, it's just these are the instruments, they come, and but you know, I've in recent years, I started to do a little bit more stuff with pianists here. And I made a recording. And another one of my mentors, Michael Caine, great pianist, composer, Michael Caine. He actually moved to the Twin Cities right before COVID. And so he's been here. So we've been able to do some things together. And we made this trio recording with me and him and Anthony Cox, the bassist Anthony Cox. no drums, which was not unusual for me to not to. I've done several projects where I don't have any drums. Um, some of that comes from well, it comes from a lot of different places. Some of it comes from NEC and people just playing in different groups, all different kind of collections of instrumentalists and stuff like that. So that kind of was a little bit of a tangent from you asking about the piano, but it's sort of why I often don't, but that I've been able to do some stuff more recently.
Let's talk about the trombone.
Okay, the
I
P-bone.
got my P-bone here.
Yeah.
Figured I'd bring it out. Previous guest. I don't have the names of our previous trombone player guests on the tip of my tongue. I would share them with you. There's actually an interesting number of trombonists who, at least that we've come across, that do like composition, arranging, ensemble stuff, which is, I guess maybe partly because trombone is kind of an ensemble instrument, maybe. Like you're just
Well,
used to thinking in terms of being in the context of the larger groups.
it is possible. It's part of like if you don't, otherwise you're not going to have a gig if you don't if you don't write
You don't
for
think
your
about
if
ensembles,
you're
yeah.
not writing
I'm
for
not gonna
yourself
be
and the group.
playing at the department store or something.
Right. Yeah. But that's very true. There's a whole legacy of that, and the sort of common wisdom about that is that trombone is right in the middle of the ensemble.
Hmm?
Definitely like just like both physically, like where a big band is set up, and then like registrally, it's kind of low to medium, and so we kind of hear the ensemble from the inside out.
Yeah.
And so I think trombonists tend to just like are more equipped kind of to kind of build stuff from that when they kind of have the fundamentals and the way they hear the way things are built from the inside out.
I'm kind of panicking here. Okay, this goes on here. Is
I
that
think
is
I
that
think
right?
so. That looks right. Yeah.
It's like, oh, I'll put this thing together. Oh, it's actually more complicated than I thought. I got this from my son, as I told you. Does that look
Yeah.
right?
Could be. Depends on where how the slide. Yeah, that should
This
be.
little thing
That's the
seems
right.
to fit right in there,
Okay.
so that's good. And then this goes on here.
Yeah.
I think, yeah. Uh,
That's probably upside down because
upside down.
the water key is on the
Okay.
tip there. Should be on the
Okay.
bottom.
Okay. All
Yes.
right. Let's do that. Can tell we only got this thing out a handful of times. Oh yeah, then this thing will locks it
Yeah.
together.
Okay.
And I'm curious. I put on the original sound for musicians. I don't know if this is gonna. If you guys can even hear it. Am I holding it right?
More or less. Yeah.
Okay. Let's unlock it. Let's see. Just tell me if you can even hear this.
You can
Could
kind
you
of hear
hear
it.
it?
It's
You could
sort of
hear
like
it
in the background, but you can hear
in
it
the
pretty
background?
clearly. Yeah.
See? I'm amazing.
Yeah. I may need a lesson from you.
You need a listen. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You
Yeah.
just you
Yeah.
just put this thing out and back in and it
Okay.
all comes can you tell this is so basic for you, but I'm just curious since we have you here. What's something cool I should learn as like a beginner on a trombone?
Um. Like what's a melody
I
you
don't
should learn?
even know.
Yeah.
There's positions, right?
Yeah. There
There's
are
like
positions.
first, second, third, or four. How do
Yeah.
you know when to, because you have to stop at a certain point.
It
How
is.
many different stopping points are there along the lines of this thing?
It's one of the big mysteries of that instrument.
Oh, really?
There's seven positions,
Wow.
but it depends on what register you're in. They're not necessarily in the same place.
Holy cow. Wow.
So, and then you've got a small instrument, so seventh position is basically almost all the way out.
Almost all the way out.
Yeah,
Okay.
the seventh position. And so trombonists generally don't like that one because
Okay.
it's hard to manipulate, it's hard to control, it's hard to get out
Right. You
there.
just got to use your fingers or something. Yeah.
Yep, kind of have to extend your hand for most people. Now they developed a trombone years ago that has an F attachment and another set of tubing, so you can hit the trigger and then you don't have to go out as far. You can
Okay.
also it's easier to play lower. Um, a lot of bass trombones have two triggers, so you're basically changing the key of the instrument by changing
Okay.
the length of the tubing. So
All right.
they don't
This
have
doesn't
that on
have
for a
those.
P bone. No, they don't really.
No.
I don't know if they. I'm not sure they're developing that technology
Okay.
for the P bone. Yeah.
Now, can I just ask, so we're piano tuners, so we know a lot about harmonics, which we call partials. which are part of understanding the trombone. So let's
Yes.
find maybe an intersection point here, and then we can move on to more talking about you. But I'm just finding this fun. So
No, good.
so when I go to each position, I'm assuming there's almost like we would call like a partial series that I can run through, right? So
Yep.
it goes, octave, then octave and a fifth, and then like two octaves, and then up a major third from that, right? And then the fifth and the dominant seventh, right? And
Yep.
then the octave again, and then you've got a whole step, and then maybe you've got the augmented fourth next. Is that
Yeah,
how
I
it goes
mean,
up?
yeah, now you're getting into a range that a lot of people
You don't
can't
even play in.
can't
Yeah.
go that. I mean, really great players can start to venture up into that register. But yeah, above that high B flat, which is a B flat four on piano,
Uh-huh.
basically. Once you start to get up there, like the average player doesn't tend to spend a lot of time up there
Okay.
after past that.
And that's
Um,
that seventh, that sort of seventh partial, really. What we would call the seventh partial is the dominant seventh of the
right. So
original note.
right. Yeah. So first position is that instrument. It's a strange thing, but that instrument is in B flat. So the
Okay.
first
Okay.
position all the way in is B
Oh,
flat.
okay.
We
Okay, got it.
read in concert pitch. It's really strange. So I
Oh,
mean, it's not strange for us because that's how we learn how to do it. The
okay.
trumpet is
Interesting.
basically an octave up, but B flat trumpet reads, transposes. You
Right,
know,
right, right.
so it's an interesting thing
Hmm.
for why that is. But yeah, the fundamentals actually is the pedal. We call that the pedal pitch, the pedal B flat,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of
Hmm.
people, like young players, have a hard time playing that pitch.
Just
So
yeah.
it's like the most basic, the core of the harmonic series. A
Hmm.
lot of people, when you're learning, you can't even play that, because you have to
Right.
really
It's
be
just
able to.
too like low and you got to really know how to manage it, the
Yep,
airspeed, right?
yep, yep,
All right. I'm gonna probably move on real just so we can talk more about you. But in terms of the seven positions, I'm assuming they all have their own sort of pedal tone or fundamental pitch, whatever you want to call it.
yep.
Are those like a major scale, or what are those seven? Like, do they go up kind of chromatically or by whole step, or what do
So
they
it's
end
the
up
opposite.
being?
So it's the opposite because if you think about it, when you're putting the
Right.
slide out,
This
you're
is a
lengthening the
low.
tube, so it's
Yeah.
getting lower, right?
Okay.
So first position all the way in is B flat, and so second position is A,
Okay.
and you're going down chromatically. So every position is going down chromatically. So seventh position is E,
Okay.
right? All the way out is E.
E.
But yeah, so then all those have their own. They have their own harmonic series above that's that set of partials that you said. So
Okay.
um,
And is it half steps
each
as you go
position is
down
a
to the
half
different
step. Yeah.
half step down?
Yep.
Oh.
Yep.
So really you have a lot of it. It's a tritone
Yep.
kind of. It makes a tritone in the range.
Exactly.
All right.
So
All
the
right.
so just to kind of like
Yeah, sure.
some trombonistic stuff related on that. So because trombone is built on a slide, doesn't have keys
Hmm.
and doesn't have buttons, right? We hypothetically have to tongue every single note to make an articulation. Whereas,
Right.
trumpet or French horn or saxophone or clarinet or anything, you can just finger something and that will create an articulation when you change note, right?
Right.
Trombones, it's not so easy. Mostly you can't because
Hmm.
if you do that, you're going to get this whir, get this
Hmm.
sliding sound that sometimes you want, but most times you don't necessarily want unless you're going for a certain kind of effect, right? So, but one way that people have learned how to deal with that is that you can use the harmonic series to help that. So you can do a lip slur. So
Hmm.
if you're say
Tighten
an
it
F,
up a little bit.
yeah, so you go from, let's say, F, which is that third partial,
Hmm.
up to the B flat. You can just slur and then go and you learn how to do that. You practice that over time, so you can do it really quickly. So
Okay.
you can make a slur without having to using your tongue. And then as you develop, like, you can actually move the slide to get that if you move it fast enough. And then generally speaking, trombonists, like, the way they use the slide, they decrease because the notes become closer together, so we don't have to go out as far to get to the same notes.
Hmm.
But a lot of jazz players learn alternate positions, so you can use the harmonic series. You can use these natural slurs
Hmm.
if you're willing to kind of go out into the kind of nether regions of the slide, even when you're in the upper register. So
Hmm.
It's one thing we learn. We learn and we practice like doing a lip slur and then tonguing and trying to get those things to kind of sound as close as they can to each other. So
Awesome. Thank you. I feel
yeah.
like, yeah, from a piano tuner's perspective, I'm finding or just a general musician, you know. Um, and then, so basically with each of these positions, you can go up a fifth, up an octave, and then up those a few different, as high
Yep.
as you can go. And yeah, okay. Well, thank you. Let's talk more about your music.
Okay.
That was like, okay, anybody could teach me that, really, but most people who are good in advanced domains I've found also have the fundamentals locked in.
Well, I've taught
Um,
plenty of trombone lessons in my life,
I'm
so
sure, I'm
it's
sure.
and thought about it a
Um,
lot, how to learn how to play it better. So yeah.
all right, what should we listen to next?
Well, maybe we can listen to something from what I was just talking about.
Yeah.
This is a live version of this group New Pass that I recorded with Michael Caine and Anthony Cox. But I did this is when I went back to New York to do a CD release show a couple of years ago, and so I hired a couple guys from there. Bassist John Abair, who I've known for years, and we've done things off and on over the years, and then a great pianist that I just met maybe just a few months before that, actually, Santiago Liebsen, who's an incredible piano player, and yeah, so this is kind of one of these sort of things where, again, no drums. It's sort of more of a chamber music approach to to jazz. You know, pretty early on when I really started to think of myself as an artist, I just kind of like didn't like to think, you know, this is jazz and this is classical or this is some, I just kind of liked to blur all these edges of things, as much as I could. And so that this group is kind of a lot about that. It's a chamber group, but we play kind of jazz-ish things, but it's not all of it is definitely is that sort of thing. And then there's this great legacy of small groups that don't have drums. That Jimmy Jufrey comes to mind, and great duos. I was the duo record with Bob Brookmeyer and Jim Hall is just like one of like the peak sort of great representations of kind of these smaller groups that don't. So I was very inspired about that kind of stuff. So I actually have this video of when we recorded it in Shoals Street Studio, which is a great little performance space in Williamsburg, in Brooklyn. And it's sort of a ballad, but it's the whole thing's rubato, which is another thing that I really learned to really embrace, playing things out of specific time, and just like finding our way through it together. Really, Paul Motion Trio was one of the first groups I really heard people to do that, like over standards and forms that have chord changes to them and stuff like that. And somehow they just I was just so amazed they could kind of do that together without something like steady happening. So anyway, this is a piece that I wrote actually about the loss of my dog, but much years after I actually lost her. So it's called "Some Moments Are Eternal." I think you're muted. Yep.
Hello?
There you are.
Okay, good. Um, yeah, that was interesting. I like the trombone almost took on like a theremin type quality for
Hmm.
me,
Hmm.
like because you got that the sort of vibrato that comes on the different notes and the sliding quality that you can have. It felt like a theremin in like a lower pitch range sometimes, which is very fun. Um, And what was the name of the location again?
Shoals Street Studio.
Shoal like Scholes
Correct.
or
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
I'll look
It's
that
right
up.
at the end of that video. It says where it was recorded.
Okay, great. We have just a touch more time left. I'm curious if it makes sense to listen to something else or chat some more, or I don't know. Do you have any thoughts?
Sure. Yeah. Maybe we'll listen. Maybe good to listen. To this last thing that I sent. I go through all these different stages, especially since I moved to Minnesota. Trying to kind of find what my voice is when I'm in this kind of different environment and I'm not, surrounded by these people in Brooklyn and stuff. And then COVID came and kind of changed a lot of things, but we got one of the really beautiful things about living in Minnesota is there's a ton of funding for the arts in places that there's nowhere else in the U.S. gives as much funding to the arts. Actually, in the state constitution, voters chose that a percentage of their taxes goes to fund the arts.
Hmm.
So I've managed to get a bunch of grants since I moved here. Both my wife and I have. And so I've made a bunch of recordings, different kinds. And coming out of COVID, I made 2 standards recordings, just standards, playing, more or less pretty straight ahead. Made that recording with Michael and Anthony. And the most recent thing I started doing is, again, trying to kind of explore these different things. I started to play with guitar effects in recent years, kind of running my horn through guitar effects, which is not novel. Robin Eubanks was like doing this in like the 80s and stuff. It's not like crazy. But it was interesting how it kind of like, kind of changed the way I play on things, which I thought was really cool. And so I experiment with that. And so the last recording that I made is with my electric quartet. I call it EQ for electric quartet. And so it's electric guitar, electric bass, which I never recorded with just like an electric bassist who specializes in that, and drums, and then me and effects. So this is the title. Well, that's not the title track. It's the opening track from our album Denki. That Denki means electricity in Japanese. So it's also not English. It's called Ausgleich, which sort of loosely means unbalanced. In German. And then you can kind of hear maybe some of the things we heard in the first piece about how I like to shift things, how that kind of carried over to kind of the way I sort of do that in this instance.
Okay. Yeah. All right. And we'll see if we get to the whole thing. If not, we'll just cut out at an appropriate time.
You'll get the idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. All right, I'll cut it there.
Nicely done.
Uh, yeah, that's some cool stuff. Yeah. Now, I hear multiple trombones at the same time. Was that just you being doubled or something? Yeah.
Yeah, so I use it's a harmonizer.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
much of that is just there's a fourth above what I'm doing.
Okay.
Later on in the tune, I add another fourth, and so I've got all these parallel two sets of parallel fourths like
Okay.
going all at once. So, and then there's
Cool.
other kinds of like kind of like effects, sort of sounds like all the reverb and like chorus and these kinds of different things that sort of alter the sound, and that wouldn't happen otherwise.
Thank you for sharing. Unfortunately, we do have to wrap up soon, but it's been fascinating to explore your musical world. And I want to give you a moment to kind of share, your final thoughts. If you have any, words of wisdom or links or promotions or whatever you feel appropriate, the floor is yours, and we'll log off.
Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, that group is actually going to record a new album next month, but it's going to be all written by a guy named Scott Miller, who's a composer who does a lot of electronics and stuff. But he loved our group so much, he got money to record that band again. So stay tuned for that. It's going to come out early 2027. Also, stay tuned. At least it's going to be released at least on the internet. This concert I did with the great pianist Danilo Pérez back in November with the North German Radio Big Band. It was going to be on TV over there. I'm not sure it happened, but they're going to release that sort of thing, and hopefully we're going to be doing more stuff with them together too. So,
All right. Thank you so much. All right. We have reached the end of another musical journey here at Piano Tech Radio Hour. Thank you very much to JC Sanford as well as our live audience today for joining us. As always, brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, cutting edge instruction for piano industry masters without leaving your home. If you joined us today by signing up for the session independently and make your life more convenient, subscribe to Piano Tech Radio Hours, $16 a month. You'll get the recording of today's session in our member area, as well as automatic registration for each week's new session. Sign up at bit.ly/join PTRH. That's bit.ly/join PTRH. Don't forget about the podcast, audio only versions, the Substack blog, the socials, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and of course our email list. Just your name and email, and you'll stay up to date on everything that's going on. We'll say goodbye for now, JC. I'll see you back on the Zoom link in a moment, and we'll do a quick wrap up. All right, everyone, enjoy your holiday weekend. Thanks for taking the time to be with us, and we'll see you again.